strategic opportunities and tie-ups with Sri Lanka. I would like to invite Ambassador Sinha, Shri C.S. Azad, and Mr. B.N. Bankapur on stage. Things don't happen, you create them. Moving forward, we now begin session 2, focusing on strategic opportunities available for business collaborations and economic partnership between India and Sri Lanka. This session will be chaired by Mr. Y.K. Sinha, former Chief Information Commissioner of India and former High Commissioner to Sri Lanka and UK. Ambassador Sinha is a seasoned diplomat with extensive experience in the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. He has held key positions including Additional Secretary and Joint Secretary for Pakistan, Afghanistan and Iran. His international postings include serving as Consul General of India in Dubai and Counselor at India's permanent mission to the UN in New York. He has also served in India's diplomatic missions in Islamabad, Rome, Riyadh and Cairo. Domestically, he played a pivotal role as director of the SAARC Summit and non-aligned movement meetings. His expertise spans political affairs, trade diplomacy, and international relations. As panelists, we have Shri C.S. Azad, Executive Director, Technical. With a degree of Electronics and Telecom Engineering and a PG in Financial Management, he focuses on growth and cost optimization. He leads the technical department, overseeing strategic projects, purchase, IT, and technical functions. As CIO, he drives digital transformation by implementing modern IT and AI tools. He played a key role in revamping the gas turbine-based captive power plant at Hazira. This project led to a significant energy and cost saving and received recognition from Government of India. His leadership continues to shape CRIBCO technological and sustainable achievements. The other panelist we have is Mr. B.N. Bankapur. Mr. B.N. Bankapur has more than 40 years of experience in oil and gas industry in India. The post of Director Refineries from India's largest commercial enterprises and a Maharatna company, Indian Oil Corporation Limited, with over US $72 billion turnover for the year 2010 to 2011. Also, he was on the board of directors of Chennai Petroleum Corporation Limited and Engineers India Limited, and chairman of Indian Synthetic Rubber Limited, a joint venture between Indian Oil and TSRC, Taiwan, for styrene rubber production. He was director of the board, Refinery and Petrochemical and Indian Oil Tanking. He is one of the few level project directors certified by International Project Management Association, USA, also an assessor for certification. Once again, I welcome Mr. Ishan Dissanayake to present the Sri Lankan perspective. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and esteemed panelists. We have this is the second session, I believe, after the inauguration, and the topic is strategic opportunities for tie-up with Sri Lanka. It's a very interesting topic, not only because I think the expertise that we have on the panel, we go into areas of trade, investment, technological cooperation, and any other subject that the panelists would like to highlight. But I want to just begin by giving a brief overview. I think in the previous session there was a general overview, and my senior colleague Ambassador Chakravarti talked about the subcontinent in South Asia, where the cooperation between amongst countries, the possibilities are limitless, but the actual situation on the ground uh, is more than, is less than what would be expected of neighboring countries. So I think we try and see how the chamber in particular is doing very good work here. I recall when the chamber was started a decade ago, I think, and the work it has been doing, tying up with counterparts in Sri Lanka and of course the High Commission here in Sri Lankan High Commission in Delhi and the Indian High Commission in Colombo, in trying to see how further, how the chamber itself can play a role in promoting and strengthening the already very strong ties. There was a reference to the overall trade, about $5.5 billion. Actually, that went down, if I remember correctly, because of the problems that, the economic problems that Sri Lanka faced. And in 2024, that figure was down to almost $4 billion. But I think that's a temporary blip, because I think it's very likely that that figure will go up as the Sri Lankan economy recovers, and it is very well on its way to recovery. And as long as, and as far as Indian economy is doing well. So I think the tie-ups, the possibilities for tie-ups are indeed immense. Now, which are the areas that you'd like to, that rather the Indian industry should focus on, and both the business community should try and see in tying up? This is something that we will discuss further in the panel. But of course, the existing investments in, for instance, Indian Oil Corporation, the Sri Lanka IOC is a very big organization in Sri Lanka. When I was there, it was providing 18% of the retail fuel. I don't know, the figure must have gone up because, or gone down, I don't know, because there are more players that have come as far as retailing in energy is concerned. The good thing, of course, as far as IOC, and I request Mr. Bankapur to elaborate on that, is that both the governments have agreed to utilize the Trincomalee tank farms. The Trincomalee tank farms are farms, oil from tanks that were set up by the British during World War II to store oil. And it was very important, very crucial, played a very crucial part in energy supplies to the Allied forces in the Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific sector. Of course, there is also an interesting aside that a Japanese kamikaze pilot actually dived into one of the tanks, and instead of 100, there are 99 now that can be used. But the lower, and I'll leave that to Mr. Bankapur. I don't want to go into too much detail there. There are other sectors in energy where we should be collaborating and where we have not been collaborating. And the problem is that there are some excellent ideas being thrown up, and not recently. Some of these ideas are very old. For instance, connecting the grids of both the countries, the power grids. Now, this is an idea whose time has come, I think, but it's been discussed for so long. And because of impediments, sometimes on the Indian side, I don't want to blame our Sri Lankan friends. I recall when I was there were impediments on our side. There will be political, in fact, impediments where we couldn't establish the grid. But I think now is the opportunity, because the world is passing us by as far as regional cooperation is concerned. South Asia is perhaps the least connected, and the level of cooperation is very low, simply because we are unable to overcome the vestiges of the past. You know, we need to move on, and I think the governments in all these countries owe it to their people, because our number one task is economic growth and the welfare of our people. So the energy is one area which we should talk about. Connectivity, which was discussed. Somebody raised a question about connectivity. I think physical connectivity is extremely important, and if I recall correctly, both the statements, was made by the joint statement, the vision document actually issued by the former President Ranil Wickremesinghe when he was here in July 2023, and President Dissanayake when he was here in December last year, talk about connectivity and the need in various, whether it's digital connectivity, whether it's physical connectivity, whether it's people-to-people contacts. I think we must facilitate. And most important, in my opinion, is the economic contacts, the commercial and economic content of the relationship, which is very much right now under par. Indian companies have invested, if I last figure I read, almost $2 billion since right from the beginning actually. So as a cumulative investment of $2 billion, which is, as far as India is concerned, not much. It should have been much higher. And I think both the countries need to see where they can increase investment. I mean, we have Dr. Azad, he can probably talk about sustainable agriculture and cooperation between the two countries, because one of the reasons for the problem that Sri Lanka faced in the Araglia protest, that led to the Araglia protest 3 years ago, was a problem in agriculture and foodstuff, getting availability of foodstuff. And I think if India can help, that will be very, very important. So I'm not going to take more time. I think we will just, I've sort of outlined broadly the ferry service somebody mentioned. There is already a ferry service between Kankesanturai and Nagapatnam. But what we need to revive the old ferry service between Mannar and Rameshwaram, and that's very much on the agenda of the governments. Again, in the past, it was not done because of political reasons. And I think we more or less hopefully overcome those political issues, and we can start, because that would help. In the past, people would travel from Colombo to Mannar and then take the ferry across and then connect by train from Rameshwaram to the rest of India. And that was the easiest and the cheapest mode of travel. Airfares are not affordable for a large number of our people on both sides. So I think it's important to revive those links, and if there is investment required, I'm sure there are Indian companies and Sri Lankan partners who would be prepared to invest. I'm happy that the Jaffna, the Palali airport has been restored, and there are flights between Chennai and Jaffna, Palali. But there are various other areas where we can be cooperating, and we should be cooperating, including manufacturing. I remember in my time there was a serious attempt by one of our leading automobile manufacturers to try and see whether they could set up a plant in Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka imports a very large number of automobiles from India. So, but that did not fructify at that time. Perhaps we can look at it again. But I will stop here, and I'll request Mr. Dissanayake to give us an update on what's happening on the economic, commercial side. And he's been here for some time, and he has a better idea than me on exactly what's happening right now. I left Sri Lanka 6 years ago, so this is updated, Mr. Dissanayake.
Thank you, sir. Before moving on, I would like to answer the question relating to the legal system. Sri Lanka has a peculiar system. It's a mixed legal system. It's Roman Dutch, plus the when it comes to commercial law, it's English principles. So very much par with it. Since I'm the trade diplomat, I have to start from the ISFTA agreement. So ISFTA agreement was the first agreement that Sri Lanka has signed, and also it was the first agreement India has signed. And it came into being in 2000, and there are other regional agreements such as APTA, SAFTA, SAFTA and GSTP. When it comes to trade, I mean, Sri Lanka, 60% of, more than 66% of the trade Sri Lankan exports comes through these agreements. But interestingly, less than 10% of the Indian exports are going through these things, because India has become the cheapest producer when it comes to these kind of intermediate goods. So that's a development. And also we were in discussion before the change of government, the 14th round of EDCA negotiations, we concluded that, and most probably there will be a policy decision on EDCA negotiations, and there is this bilateral investment treaty which is going to happen. So the policy decision will be taken by the authorities in Colombo, and hopefully the negotiations will start. I mean, bilateral investment agreement would give some certainty to the investors of India. And since said about Indian investment, yes, I think the cumulative investment figure is something like 2.3 billion. And I think there are about 170 Indian firms operating in Sri Lanka, giving employment for like 15,000 people in Sri Lanka. So it's substantial, and of course, as Sir said, there is room to improve, of course, and the low-hanging fruit is tourism, and the government is expecting 3 million tourists, and there's a room for investment in hotels, and we expect this investment will come from India as well. And also, India is the third largest startup ecosystem. So we would like to attract, like there could be a synergy in startups, and big firms like Tata Infosys and HCL is operating in Sri Lanka. And HCL told us that during the COVID, the one of best centers was the one was in Colombo. So, and they are going to expand it by 1,000 programmers. So that's a good thing. So I think we can have that kind of synergy when it comes to IT sector. And also we are looking for like pharma investment, and especially on renewables, because the government made a target to go for like renewables, so solar and batteries and that kind of new technologies. Yeah, maybe India can help us in that areas. So yeah, thank you.
Just to add, the one question on the judicial cooperation. In my time, I remember the Honorable Chief Justice Mohan Piris, I think, in those days, he started something, training of judicial officers, Sri Lankan judicial officers, in the National Judicial Academy in Bhopal. I believe that was discontinued for a while because of economic reasons. I hope that can be revived. So, to answer your question, a very good suggestion. We must have that sort of cooperation, and I think it's beneficial to both sides. On the EDCA, if I may, EDCA has been negotiated for a long time, but we also must understand the Sri Lankan point of view. I think Mr. Disnaik is being, and I realize that because the FTA that was signed, there are certain issues that have come up with the FTA, where certain products of great interest to Sri Lanka, like pepper, there are non-tariff barriers, etc., erected in India. And I had had a lot of discussions, and I even apprised the Commerce Ministry at that point of time that we must take care of these, because under SAFTA, in any case, it is duty-free. But there were problems because of our own manufacturers. So I think I just gave an example. So these negotiations which are going on will hopefully overcome all these sort of impediments. On investments, I'm not sure whether you're aware that Sri Lanka has been making investments in India, and especially in apparel. Brandex in Visakhapatnam employs thousands of women to produce, women lingerie, etc., which is also then exported outside India, and they have a huge investment. Similarly, MAS, I think, has, Hyder Rahmani also have. So there are investments coming from Sri Lanka. That is important because it has to be a two-way street. I think it's very important. Can I request Dr. Azad to tell us something about how we can enhance cooperation between India and Sri Lanka and the agriculture field, how we can help them in that field?
TRIPCO as such is a farmers organization. It's different from any corporate. We are owned by farmers. We are for the farmers, by the farmers, and of the farmers. So we are very well connected at grassroots level, not only in providing them required inputs, but also in supporting farm extension services to have a sustainable, balanced agriculture. The mistake happened in Sri Lanka was tried to be organic. See, being one of the biggest urea producer and market here, one should not take chemical fertilizer as a taboo. See, ultimately it is providing nitrogen and required nutrient. The only thing is that while doing that, one should not extract the nutrient to that extent where replacement is not happening and the structure of the soil itself is getting bad. So we have to manage both the things. We are also producer of biofertilizers, we are supplying compost, seaweeds, zinc sulfate, micronutrients. So all these things are required. So unlike relying purely on biofertilizers or compost may not be feasible because we have to feed a large amount. And the changes has happened in the agriculture. Farmers are taking 2 or 3 crops and a lot of nutrients are getting extracted. So a balanced approach is required, which CRIPCO is trying to do. So we are taking a gamut of complete, not only chemical fertilizers but also biofertilizers and compounds. This is how our approach should be.
Thank you, Dr. Zadna. It's very relevant because I know that in the past Sri Lanka has experimented with organic farming, which led to a big crisis in availability of foodstuff 3 years ago. So I think perhaps there is an area of collaboration between India and Sri Lanka in fertilizers, trade in fertilizers, and maybe CRIPCO. I don't know whether CRIPCO invests outside, but perhaps look at investing in Sri Lanka also, at least if not setting up a production unit, at least training people, etc. we can do. I'd like to turn to Mr. Bankapur from the Indian Oil Corporation. I mentioned about the activities of Sri Lanka IOC, but apart from just oil, there are other areas. I remember in Sampur, near Trincomalee, a thermal power plant was supposed to come up, NTPC was supposed to do it, but then that got cancelled, and now there is a proposal to set up a solar plant there. There is also a multimodal supply of energy products from India to Sri Lanka, pipeline, I mean basically using tankers right now, but to supply Sri Lanka because energy needs there, and natural gas. So I think there are various areas in the energy sector where India and Sri Lanka can collaborate to mutual benefit. But I'll request Mr. Bankapur to elaborate on some of these themes.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon to all of you. I think, as being brought out, energy happens to be one of the most important sector for any country. If a country has to grow, I think energy has to be there. Without energy, you cannot really get into a developed country. So, looking at the energy sector at Sri Lanka, it is almost more or less similar to what we do here in India. The majority of the fuel energy is from the oil, fossil fuel. Oil only is constitute about, I understand, about almost 38 to 40%, followed by coal about 10 to 11%. Solar, in fact, renewable energy, if you look at the country-wise, I think they are doing tremendously well. The solar or renewable energy contributes almost to about 11 to 12%, which is considered substantial in present day situation, considering the total energy. Now, in terms of looking at the energy sector in general, having single refinery at Sri Lanka, I think they import all the products. Almost about 60% of their fuel products are imported as a refined product. And so, if you really want to look at this energy, there, as I see, there are plenty of opportunities right from establishing a refinery there. I think there were earlier proposals to establish a refinery, which is, I think, still not happening. So refinery is one area where refinery can be set up easily, and where it is, the consumption could be domestically done in Sri Lanka. And added to that, like India, the crude oil production in Sri Lanka is also limited. I think there is hardly any production. There are almost all crude which is processed in the refinery is imported, mostly from UAE or the Middle East, some nearby countries, like even including Malaysia and things like that. So it becomes very essential for Sri Lanka to have energy security, which we talk. So in India, having developed so much in terms of refining technologies, petrochemicals, pipelines across the countries which India has today, and I think I would believe that there is enough expertise and experience in India which can easily help Sri Lanka. So it is, and it's not that it's economically also it's quite viable. Any private sector also can enter into this sort of business. So presently, oil, as I said, there's hardly any production, but there are a lot of studies done by Sri Lankan government which shows that oil fields in Mannar, particularly the northwest of Sri Lanka, appears to be having a very good potential for crude oil production as well as gas. And that is one area where I think people, I mean, the organization like ONGC from India or Oil India can venture into getting into those areas of investment and developing them. Similarly, the pipeline across the city, I mean, across Sri Lankan country, I think Sri Lanka is having hardly any pipeline for movement. Most of it is moved by road tankers or rail tankers, so which can be developed into a safe transportation system using pipeline. And these are the opportunities which I see from oil industry point of view. Other than that, as I said, the country is blessed with a lot of solar energy like what we have in India. I think they have huge potential to go for solar. Already they are doing, as I said, considerably good. And there are a lot of projects which I think Sri Lankan government already published or wanting to get into that. Only they are looking for some good investments to come in so that they can do it. I think I happened to see a tender for about 100 megawatt solar power plant to be established in this. I also believe that they have very good incentives. They fixed payment for the generation, electricity generated, and a lot of securities for the investment, so that the tariffs are much better than what India offers to a solar plant project here. So looking at those things, solar could be one area. Similarly, they also have a good wind velocities across the country, which means that you can also have a windmills. Several, I mean, plenty of potential for going in for windmills as well. So in general, I would look at huge opportunities in Sri Lanka, which could be refinery, which could be oil production, it could be pipelines, it could be solar, it could be wind. And apart from that, even on product to product wise, if you are looking at bitumen or you are looking at, let's say, lubricants, if you are looking at aviation fuel, I think there's again a good potential in Sri Lanka to come forward. And presently, the Sri Lankan per capita energy consumption is lower than India, and India itself is 1/3 or 1/4 of the global consumption. So looking at that, I think there's in fact, if you want to really improve the quality of the people, energy has to be made, and then per capita consumption has to go up. If that has to happen, you can look at, like I always say, for India there is a huge potential to put up any number of refineries. Same thing for Sri Lanka. So there is a potential. Only thing is, the problem I tell you is the costs are very highly capital intensive projects. So people tend to hesitate. For Indian investor, private investor, it will be a new country outside. Security of the investment, returns on the investment would be an issue. But whatever Sri Lankan government has announced so far, I think they are assuring a fixed return on the investment made by way of fixation of the tariff which they will give for the power generation, or looking at some incentives on the power, putting up good taxation, exemptions, things like that. Apart from that, Sri Lanka also happens to be a logistically well-placed country. It is between it is between the crude oil producing majors of Middle East. It is in the closest to the oil consuming countries like Southeast Asian countries, and the manpower costs are quite low. Considering all that, it becomes a very highly incentivized place to put up any project. And there could also be, as Mr. Y.K. Sinha said, there are large number of tanks which were earlier built, 99 as rightly said, of 12,000 KL each. You can imagine the volume. It could be good strategic reservoir for anybody to store crude oil. So these tanks which are not used for ages now can be refurbished, repaired and put to use, so that it becomes a strategic storage facility there, which can be used for moving to any other countries. So that option remains. Also the option of developing that port, like it could be another Mundra of Sri Lanka, which can take all the, store the crudes and logistically well placed. You can have a refinery around. It could be a good hub for all the oil and petrochemical storage. So these are the opportunities, but only investment are high. So there would be some hesitation, and of course with our chamber's help as well as the Sri Lankan government and Indian government help, I think we can look at those investments and then really go further. For Indian investor, it is a safe in the sense. Today, if anybody wants to put up a refinery in India and on the coast, there is no land available. So here is a place where the land is readily available and someone can really venture into it. I think I would conclude saying that the potential to invest in Sri Lanka safely and economically viable is possible. The areas are not limited, there are plenty, starting from pipeline to power, solar power, wind power, storage of petroleum products, refinery, all of them can be done. So it's only how we push forward and get them happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vadapur. I recall when I was there, we tried to persuade Indian Oil to open a refinery in Trincomalee, but you're right, investments were too high. But the way you visualize the development of Trincomalee, perhaps at a future date we can look at it. Meanwhile, China has stepped in, and I think Sinopec has announced setting up a refinery in Hambantota. But I think to sum up, there are various areas where our companies can invest in Sri Lanka. What we didn't touch upon in greater detail is connectivity. We talked about the ferry service. There's also a very important area, the digital connectivity. And I think there is, if I recall correctly, during President Dissanayaka's visit in December, there were discussions on cooperation between the two countries in digital public infrastructure. So that is very important. Our STACK program, etc., which has been highly successful in India, can be sort of not necessarily replicated, but at least lessons learned, and something similar could happen in Sri Lanka. I know that the unique identity card that the Sri Lankan authorities are visualizing, there is some sort of cooperation ongoing with India. But in the tourism sector, I mean, you mentioned Trincomalee. If you go south of Trincomalee, between Trinco and Batticaloa, we have one of the most beautiful beaches, and I would recommend, if you haven't been, all of you try and go there, though getting there is very difficult. Pasikoda. Pasikoda has some natural deep beaches, white sand beaches, and we don't have an Indian hotel. So I think hospitality sector, we should try to do much more, invest in I know that the Taj Group is there already for quite some time. You have the ITC, which just opened a hotel in Colombo at the golf face, but we need many more players, especially the smaller players, 3-star and 4-star hotels that would encourage tourism. And I think Indians are the largest tourist arrivals in Sri Lanka, and now with the economy looking up, I'm sure the numbers will only increase. So it's important to concentrate on areas where there is, I mean, you mentioned Trincomalee has the, I mean, I don't know how people are aware, it is I think the second deepest harbour, natural harbour in the world after Sydney. and the immense possibilities. If you just fly into Trincomalee, you will realize so much that can be done in that area, not just Trincomalee, but the area which is quite underdeveloped, so on the eastern coast. So I think we can, both India and Sri Lanka can do much more. But to end, when you talk about connectivity, I recall in the 80s, I was posted in Saudi Arabia, and those days we used to be sort of incredulous that 10 or 15 kilometer land bridge was being built between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, Dammam and Bahrain. And we used to wonder how that was possible. It was done in the 80s itself. And now we are in the 21st century. Can you imagine if we could do something similar between India and Sri Lanka? It would facilitate not just movement of people, but movement of goods, and integrate the economies of not just India and Sri Lanka, but the South Asia. Sri Lanka would have access through the Indian networks to other SAARC countries and other neighbors of India. But this obviously requires a huge investment, and also the people on both sides need to be invested in this sort of connectivity. So I think we are already looking at doing it, but it's going to be an issue. Sure.
For collaboration between two countries, of course, government to government is one, business to business is another, people to people is really important. As we are not only a business entity, we are an entity of lakhs of farmers connected with us. And what I feel, a similar kind of setup, cooperative setup. Cooperative movement is so strong in India. Amul, Wipco, Clipco, you name and you will find. So I was just going through and discussing last time that we had lunch together, trying to understand what kind of cooperative structure setup is there. So I feel we have proved a lot of advantages that can be adopted by Sri Lanka. At the same time, the kind of work or business we are in. So, of course, crude oil and energy and other things have been discussed by my colleagues. In terms of fertilizer, it is chemical fertilizers, it is biofertilizers. We can have collaboration in setting up and trading, and a lot of potentials are there. I was just going through the setup in Sri Lanka. There is a lot of phosphatic deposit, and that can be a very good starting point for collaboration, because in these areas, India, we do not have that much deposit, and it's a huge deposit which is not being utilized to the extent it should have been. So, and one more policy, favorable policy by government of Sri Lanka is to provide jetty or waterfront along with area to construct plant. Normally, phosphatic plants are constructed on the port, near the port only, because all the materials may not be available. Ammonia you may have to import. Phosphate, yes, phosphoric acid we can do. We are already working on to have collaboration with other countries, and in the very nearby to us, a lot of deposits are there that can be done. Clipco lately has entered into biorefinery. We are putting up 2 bioethanol projects. So those 1G and 2G bioenergy refineries can be done in Sri Lanka also. In collaboration, we have technology matured here for 1G, 2G of course. And there are many value-added products also. Of course, the grid connectivity can help a lot because of hybrid or which can be produced in Sri Lanka. Then the waste, agri-waste is not being utilized to that extent. Last time when we were discussing, a lot of agri-waste is being thrown away. Then like nariyal and other things, those can be converted into solid fuels also. Sri Lanka is a small country, and if the coal deposits are not there. Like in India, we have policy of utilizing 10% biofuel from agri waste along with coal. So similar kind of policies can be taken there, and we can collaborate. And these are many areas where I am finding a lot of possibilities.
Thank you, Dr. Azad. Just two aspects before I think we throw open the floor for questions, suggestions. I talked about tourism, and I forgot to mention that you're aware of the Ramayan trade in Sri Lanka and the Buddhist circuit in India, both Gaya, Sarnath, etc. So these are two circuits or trails that need to be developed. They're already, both the governments, particularly in India, the government of India and the state governments involved have facilitated tourist arrivals from Sri Lanka and other countries to famous Buddhist sites in India. But I think we need to do more in terms of connectivity and infrastructure. And I think the governments are aware of that and doing it. Similarly, in Sri Lanka, there are these places which have been identified with our epic, the Ramayana, and they're not very accessible. Some of these places are accessible. But for instance, you could go and see Ashok Vatika in Nuvarelia, near Nuvarelia. There's a very old Prachin Mandir, old temple that's there where Sitaji was kept. So, I mean, there are so many areas where, or sites, or places where tourists from India would be interested in going as long as it's publicized and infrastructure developed. And Indian hospitality sector can help in investing in these in infrastructure in Sri Lanka. And of course, we need to develop some of the infrastructure that we already have in the Buddhist circuit. The other last point was again related to connectivity, but very important for trade and investment, and that is cargo. I don't know if you're aware that the last figure I heard was 60 to 70% of India's trade, seaborne trade. I'm talking about seaborne trade, which is where all the trade generally takes place. 60% to 70% of India's seaborne trade is transshipped through Colombo port. Now, you'd be surprised to hear that. Dubai, Singapore, but Colombo because of proximity. And the reason being because our own cabotage laws prevent cargo being foreign carriers bringing cargo and offloading at say Mundra and Jain City in Mumbai or other ports. So you have to then unload the cargo, put it in smaller Indian vessels and send them to different destinations, which is not a very economical thing to do, and it sort of takes time, effort and money. But that is why what happens is the cargo comes to Colombo and is put onto smaller ships, carriers, and sent to various ports in India. Now, we as Indians did not have an investment in Sri Lanka, though all our cargo is coming, or most of it is coming through Sri Lanka. The Adani Group, of course, has invested. Earlier it was the East Terminal, but now a greenfield project in the West Terminal is coming up. And the reason why I'm highlighting it is also a security issue. So some of our large neighbors have actually got container terminals right there and handling Indian cargo. So why can't we do it ourselves? So I'm glad that somebody stepped forward to do it. Meanwhile, we've also developed Vizhingham. Adani developed Vizhingham on the western coast not to rival Colombo, but to distribute, because if they have a terminal in Colombo, they have a terminal in Vizhingham, they are able to then redistribute the cargo in such a way that the time taken is less. So right now the waiting period to unload and load cargo in Indian ports is very high. So this is one area which I think Indian infrastructure companies should look at seriously. I mean, you mentioned Trincomalee setting up port facilities there. It becomes a petrochemical or energy hub. It will be extremely important. But I'm sure there are many other areas. I mean, I know, for instance, juices. Dabur has a plant outside Colombo for quite some time now. But there are many other areas where we can look at investing. Indian companies can look Lanka investing. So I think before we conclude, I think we still have some time. I'd like to throw open the floor for a few questions. Please, my request is identify yourselves, your organization, and please be very brief and pose a question. If you have a comment, make it very brief so we can give everybody an opportunity, because the chief guest might arrive soon, so we will need to curtail this. So I request you once again, be very brief. Can we start off with you and then the lady there?
Good morning, professional studies. And my question is, you know that
Please carry on. Please go ahead.
so we know that India and Sri Lanka are both countries of the global south and both need to have an international standing. So how can both countries work together to reduce their dependence on external markets and have some sort of resilience?
Thank you. That's a good question. Anybody want to take it?
Yeah, most of our agricultural need, like basic essential food, is actually imported from India. So we are very much dependent on India for that kind of stuff. And during the this Aragalaya period, we had an economic crisis, and India stepped in and sent something closer to 2,000 metric ton of rice. And also, I must thank India for the lifeline they have thrown during the economic crisis, which was equal to 3.9 billion with currency swaps and grants and also loans. So, most of the agricultural stuff is actually coming from India, like essentials, like day to day, like not the fancy stuff, but essential stuff is coming from India.
Thank you. I think that answers your question partly in terms of, I think developing complementarities or working on complementarities is extremely important. If Sri Lanka needs something and the nearest available source is India, it should be able to avail of that as quickly as possible, rather than availing of imports from more expensive imports from further afield. And that's how you build the sort of interdependencies. And I think that's what the governments are aiming. Before we proceed, may I just acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Governor of Mizoram, General V.K. Singh. Thank you, sir, for gracing this occasion. I think the host will, I thought I must acknowledge your presence amongst us. And of course, just to remind the audience that when I was in Sri Lanka, he was the Honorable Minister of State for External Affairs, and I had the pleasure of hosting him once in his visit to Sri Lanka, a country he knows extremely well. Anyone else?
Sir, my name is R.S. Bana. I am from ICAR, Indian Council of Agricultural Research. India and Sri Lanka can collaborate very well in agricultural research, so we can collaborate in that.
Thank you. Thank you. I know with Afghanistan, for instance, we have agriculture scholarships. So perhaps we could look at something similar for Sri Lanka. On the education, broader education field, there was some proposal to IIT Madras to set up a campus in Sri Lanka. I don't know how well that is progressing. So, you know, this sort of cooperation that these suggestions are very useful, and I think the chamber will, I'm sure, note it and try and carry it forward as best as they can. Thank you.
Along with the Honorable VK Singh sir, we have our Managing Director M.R. Sharma sir with us, and our Director HR and Director of Finance.
Myself Suvena Srivastava, and I study in Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies. I had a question regarding small businesses and entrepreneurships. So you talked about how people are hesitant to invest into a new country and start up their own businesses or expand into new countries or new areas. How would you urge citizens of both countries to interact more with each other in the sense of trade, in the sense of small businesses, and basically expand it in each other's countries?
I think that's a good question, because the MSME sector is really where the cooperation can be developed, and we look at the big ticket items, and this sort of cooperation is what we should be actually promoting. And that's where I think the India Sri Lanka chamber here and the apex chambers like FICCI and CII and ASSOCHAM, etc., with their counterparts, the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce and the National Chamber of Commerce and other regional chambers of commerce in Jaffna and elsewhere, should be actually meeting and exchanging views on how they can get their members to collaborate. Thank you. I think we'll take just two more questions. The Honorable Governor is here. We don't want to. We've got the next. We have another program. We must conclude quickly. Yes, the young man there, and then you, and then we'll conclude. Thank you.
Good afternoon, panel. My name is Devansh Gupta. I study Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies as well. And my question was in relation to brain drain and how a lot of people from India and Sri Lanka choose it that it's better for them to move to countries abroad to either study or to pursue jobs because they don't find opportunities or more prudent business opportunities in both those countries. So would you think that would it be very good if India and Sri Lanka would cooperate in a way that would keep the youth, keep the intelligent youth in the country itself and not shift abroad?
Again, a very good suggestion. That's why we're probably opening an IIT campus there, so that Sri Lankan students don't go to Canada and Australia and other places when they can study at home. And similarly, large number of Sri Lankan students study in India, not through just government scholarships, but even privately. Some of our top universities, we should have many more, but the people are coming, and that's good. We should encourage that. But thank you. One last question.
Sir, as I've already introduced, I'm Dr. Kaunal Atul Tyagi, advocate. I have a brief something to say, sir, that socially, militarily, politically, in all these spheres, we have not yet counted our adversary China, which has played a very major role in Sri Lankan affairs. While we have discussed many issues, multidimensional issues related to our digital cooperation, energy cooperation, agriculture, then connectivity, Ramayana circuit, Buddha circuit and everything. But all these things are going to be thwarted, I will say, with due respect to the government of Sri Lanka and the representatives here, that you got to be circumspect in evaluating the role of China, which has put you in some kind of unfortunate debt trap, as well as I will see that our Indian government plays a sagacious and a bigger role, big brother's role, in investing more and remaining calm against this challenge which has come from China. Because Sri Lanka is yet evolving from the recent, internal imbroglio which had taken place. and India is now getting into the third slot all over the world. So that's why
Thank
solution is that we have to play a very major, thinking process at the level of the government also.
Thank you, Dr. Tyagi. Your suggestions are noted as, we have very deep cooperation in the security sector, defense and security sector. I think you had this mentioned in the last session. The Sri Lankan Navy, for instance, I'm just taking one arm, Army and Air Force, of course, also, but Sri Lankan Navy, the number of people at various levels, at officer level, at the men level, have been trained in India. We supply offshore patrol vehicles. A lot of their ships are supplied from India. So, the main point being that the cooperation between India and Sri Lanka is to promote each other's security and stability. It should not be aimed at any third country. Well, the points that you're making are well understood, but I don't think we need to embarrass our Sri Lankan colleagues here. We can, of course, have a separate discussion on that later on. But I think there's a very strong cooperation. There is the Colombo Security Enclave, which the dialogue which takes place involving India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Mauritius, and I think Seychelles. So, I mean, there are various areas where we are already cooperating. But that, I suppose, we can discuss later on. But Mr. Desanaike may want to say.
Yeah, I have a simplified answer. China is our best friend, India is our brother.
Thank you. I think with these words we will close the session. Thank you very much. Thank you, esteemed panelists, for your contribution and participation, and all of you for a very lively discussion. Thank you.